So now we have time for some Q&A for all of our 4 speakers of the first panel. We'll start with some questions, hopefully in person here in the group, and then we'll take some questions online as well. Does anyone have questions for our 4 speakers today?
Shall we invite them to the stage?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, of course. Forgot about that. So please, can all of our speakers come on to the stage? Thank you. Sorry about that. Great. So we have a very diverse, rich range of topics that was covered this morning, providing greater context to the multifaceted nature of Dunhuang. Does anyone have any questions for our speakers? Yes, in the front here.
Dr. Liu or Professor Liu, I'm very interested in your research. And then I saw that the 4 cases you present in your presentation, most of the case at the end, the judge in favor of the Buddhist monk or nun. Do you think is it possible because along the Silk Road, a lot of the ruling family or the kind of upper class family, they are Buddhists? Yeah, their religion is Buddhism. Do you think this play an impact on how the judge always give a result in favor of the monks and nuns, no matter how cruel they treat the slave?
Thank you so much for your question, and I think your guess is as good as mine. And I just to go more in that direction, not only because many of the ruling families, the most powerful and influential donors who support the Buddhist community, they love Buddhism, most of them. And I think in that direction, the other thing that I saw is a huge difference between how the ordained Buddhist nuns live their life on this frontier in Dunhuang, and also how the life of monks and nuns in central Tibet, in central China. For example, here, in these 4 cases, you have seen that in 3 of the cases with a judicial decision, most of the time the lawsuits, if there was a lawsuit, the monks and nuns were, they received a favorable, a judicial decision. But if you look at what's going on in central China, for example, I looked at a bunch of cases written by retired Chinese judges who were working as magistrates, and they within their memoir, they talked about cases that they have adjudicated. For example, in those cases in central China, oftentimes you will see something that's the complete opposite, because monks and nuns could be punished very severely for doing something that's not even a crime for a lay person. For example, one of the cases that I can tell you right now is 2 Buddhist monks. They were seen by other people to have gone into a brothel, and they were hanging out with some prostitutes, and they drank wine. They also killed geese and chicken and cooked them. And just by doing that, the magistrate who was reported to deal with the case reported in his memoir, said they tied big rocks to the 2 monks and threw them into the river and drowned them. But in Dunhuang, you get monks and nuns who can participate in slave trade, and when they go to the court, they oftentimes won. So I think your guess is in the right direction.
Thank you. Any other questions? On the left, please.
Thank you for all speakers and the excellent talks. I have learned quite a lot. I have 2 questions to 2 different speakers. First, about these slave questions. Somebody, Central Asian specialist, claimed that among the slaves there are Koreans. And did you find any document? We only know General Ko, the immigrant after the fall of Goguryeo, had a great importance in Tang history because he was a general to defeat during the wars between Central Asia and China, and he had great contribution to Tang Chinese military these affairs. There is one question. Therefore, I know only that historical fact. And I was very surprised. Somebody claimed among the slaves there were Koreans. And the second question, and Monsieur Law and you have mentioned about dragon rituals at the wells. Was that very open? It happened? Dragon rituals, you showed one Pelliot manuscript, and because I'm very interested in.
I'm going to take a break from slaves, and you can go first. Then we can go back to slaves.
The image, which is quite, now it's become common, the image of the dragon that I showed was just a way to illustrate one of the entries in manuscript Pelliot 2005 that focuses on a very long list of auspicious omens that happened from the 4th century up until the Tang Dynasty, up until the 7th century, of omens happening in the area, whether within Dunhuang or in the areas right around outside Dunhuang. And basically, one of them had actually a phoenix and not a dragon, if I'm not mistaken. But it was just for illustrative purposes that I mentioned it. Other than that, the other mention that I have found regarding dragons is a reference to that sort of divinatory practice of the dragon throwing that was happening in one of the sources near Mogao, which actually has been extensively studied by Edouard Chavannes more than 100 years ago, and an English translation should be coming out very soon, if I'm not mistaken. So.
Because it was very important. It was very important rituals in the court during the Shilla dynasty. Therefore, it is the earliest document I heard today, and thank you very much. And then about the slave.
She hasn't forgotten yet. Okay. So first of all, this is great because I think we are getting the best audience possible around the globe, right? Such informed questions. To be honest, I haven't seen anything. Looks like now, the origins of the slaves that are being traded on the Silk Road can be updated, possibly including the Koreans. And I think I will definitely look into this. So the cases that I presented were limited to the category of lawsuits because I'm interested in crimes. But we have so many more materials and documents and manuscripts that talks about the existence of slaves on the Silk Road. So I won't be surprised. I think this is like exciting new directions for studies on the Silk Road. So thank you so much, and I'll definitely look into this. But personally, I have not seen anything like that yet. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
If I can complete on the Korean presence of the Tang period, because I've been working on this. So this person in charge of the Talas battle was living in Kashgar. And his father before him, and he had, there was a very important community of Korean people who had excellence in military skills because they come from Goguryeo, and that's during the end of the Sui period battles, and so there are a lot of people who are going back on the northwest, and others we know that at the end of the Sui, early Tang, especially during Taizong period, you have a lot of people from the Goguryeo who are taking in slaves and brought to markets, local markets, and some are presented as trophies, exactly like in the Roman Empire. And those afterwards are separated by their skills and included into the administrative system. The only thing we mustn't forget is that the Korean presence in the Shandong Peninsula is very important, and the Korean are in control, complete control, especially the Shilla, of the markets between the Japan, Nara, and the Tang. But that's another subject.
Great. In the back, please wait for a moment for the mic to come to you.
This is for Professor Liu again, if I may. I just wanted to say about the Sogdian document that your first legal case, the Sogdian document about the sale of a female slave. I'm sure you're right, the very interesting comparison with the Kuroshite documents from Nia, which I think was Professor Yoshida's contribution to the discussion. But it seems to me that this must be from the Kushan period. You find very similar things in Bactrian documents. And of course, the Nia documents in Kuroshite have strong connections with those in Bactrian, although the Bactrian ones are that we actually have are of a later date. So I just want to come to an actual question. My question is, am I right in understanding that these kind of clauses which entitle the owner of the slave to do so many different things to the slave, that they are not typical of other documents in Chinese or Tibetan, for instance, from Dunhuang and Tufan? That it sounds to me as if this is, as it were, an imported formulae from a different legal system.
Thank you for your question. I think you answered the question perfectly yourself, because number one, among all the legal documents that I find, like that's the 639 Gaochang document, the sales contract is the only one with such abusive terms. And we only see identical terms in the Nia documents. And also in the legal context of China, because in the early part of my presentation, I showed one article. They actually, no, maybe I didn't show you that part. They actually talk about how, the owners of the slaves, they also have a responsibility to not ill-treat their slaves. So it's like unimaginable to even have those abusive terms to be written in a sales contract in the Chinese context. So I think you're right. I don't think, and I agree with you, I don't think it's typical in other slave trades, transactions along the Silk Road, either in the Chinese context or, in the Dunhuang region. It's not typical.
Another question on the front, in the middle section there. In the middle section there first, and then we'll take one next.
Thank you very much. I have a question for Professor Yoonah Hwang. So you mentioned about the banner making in Dunhuang. So what about the preservation of those banners? So how was it being used after those seasons, like the first month or 12 months? Do they being recycled or do they being preserved in family? And also regarding, you mentioned about this banner making is actually increase the accessibility among social classes to the Buddhism practitioner. Do you think the theme or the materials are particular in Dunhuang society, or is actually also happens in other societies where the Buddhism is the dominant religion?
Well, thank you so much for the important question. And I think the first question is really related to the life cycle of the banners after it was made by the workshop and it was donated, and then it really related to how it was consumed and how it was stored, maybe, right? And then I've been thinking about that question as well. And then the reason why we have so many materials from the library cave kind of answered to the question. So my guess is that once it was used and practiced during those communal festivals and commemoration, maybe the temple was the place they would keep or collect those materials. And that's why we ended up having so many materials from the library cave. But I will continue working on the question until I have a better answer. So if I remember correctly for your second question, how we can understand this practice compared to other regions. So I think a lot of practices that I have seen through my research is really local based, meaning that something like the long banner that I showed you with the red Damascus silk I have not seen those type of really peculiar type in other part of China. Maybe, I'm still, need to more work on those materials, but we see pretty local-based practice. So that's one of the reasons why I mentioned that I need to expand the scope of research area to other regions in order to really prove those practices were pretty local. So.
Thank you. Let's take one last question. I think there was one in the front.
Yeah, mine follows up on this one, on the banners, and it's about the colors of the textile borders. It was very interesting to see this connection with the different time of the years that these banners may have been produced. Have you come across any significance of the color itself? Does it mean anything for the banner or the painting to be bordered with a certain color rather than another, especially with painting 54, that unlike a lot of the other banners have a multicolored border. So does it have any meaning according to your research?
Thank you for a really good question. And I've been thinking about the symbols and behind the color, and there has been quite a research on how we can understand the color, making connection with the symbolism. But many examples that we can see from the painted banner from the library cave, it's quite interesting to see that a lot of materials were recycled and reused over times. So sometimes a fragment of embroidery was used for repairing some section of the borders. So I don't know, it may be reflection of a personal taste of the donors when it comes to decorating the donors, but I don't have a better answer if there's any specific symbolism behind those colors. I know there is some research has done for making connection with the direction with the colors. But for this case, I think it's more like the availability of the materials and maybe the personal preference for that. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we have run out of time, I'm afraid, but if you have further questions, perhaps you can ask during the lunch break or other coffee breaks and continue the conversation. So lastly, we want to thank all of our speakers this morning for amazing talks, really rich morning, and we look forward to continuing the symposium. So a round of applause for our speakers.